Right. So the second talk in this session will be presented by Chiara Xausa. She will speak about eco-anxiety through young adult climate change.
Thank you. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you to the organizers. I will talk about hope in climate fiction for young adults. And I have to say that I really loved Jenny's keynote this morning. She's not here, but I loved how she reframed hope as agency plus action. And she talked about transformative hope and collective hope. And I believe that some of the stuff that she said will resonate with my presentation. Okay. So the affective dimension of the current ecological crisis is giving rise to a new vocabulary, including terms such eco-griefs, climate anxiety, pre-traumatic stress, and so many words that we discussed in these days. Emerging studies reveal that the chronic fear of environmental catastrophe is particularly affecting young people's daily life. According to this very famous global survey published by Lancet Planetary Health in 2021, nearly 60% of young people are very or extremely worried about the direction of the planet. And these feelings of helplessness are amplified by a sense of intergenerational injustice that makes many young people feel. At the same time, in fictional representations about climate change is often represented as a tale of the children. It has been described as a tale of the children by Rogers, with climate change legacy bestowed upon future generations. As suggested by Valentina Adami, the centrality of children in climate change discourse is linked to the instinct of protection of our offsprings. But the problem is that this tale of the children that we have in most climate fiction, what we see most of the time is the so-called climate generation portrayed as an innocent victim that adults are failing to protect. And these are just a couple of examples. Of course, in The Last of Us, the young female protagonist has some kind of agency, but still she's not able to really have an impact on the world. So most of the time, children are a group needing protection, and they are innocent victims in a hostile landscape. This most of the time happens in climate fiction. The representation of children as assertive leaders and protagonists shaping their own future is largely confined to children's and young adult literature, where young protagonists are not the helpless inheritors of the catastrophic future that has been created for them, but they fight for their own future in the global climate change action. If really we live in a moment when many young people have been mobilizing to force the issue of climate justice into the political agenda. And it may be the issues relating to the difference of generations is set to replace even issues of gender as the most prominent catalyst of the age for political activism, as Clark says. I believe that climate fiction for young adults needs to be investigated, as there are so many novels that deal with these themes, with intergenerational justice, politics, and with hope. So in an article published in 2008 in the New York Times Sunday Book Review, John Green states that dystopian fiction for young adults constitutes an increasing market. The previous year had indeed seen the publication of more than a dozen post-apocalyptic young adult novels, creating possible futures where the consequences of our unsustainable lifestyles are taken to the extreme. Young adult dystopias you can see some examples here. Young adult dystopias make extensive use of narrative techniques that enable young readers' identification with the narrator, and they place readers close to the action that we see in the novel. For example, we see a lot the use of first-person narrator or diary entries to help readers' identification. And most of these novels engage with pressing global concerns, such as the relationship between self and technology, government oppression, and climate change. Climate change is indeed becoming increasingly popular in young adult, in dystopia and young adult fiction. We can think about Julie Bertagna's Exodus, just to name one very famous example. According to Geraldine Massey and Claire Bradford, one of the primary functions of environmental texts for young adults is to socialize young people into becoming the responsible and empathetic adults of tomorrow by positioning readers as eco-citizens, dedicated to both sustainable development in the local sphere and also to global responsibility. This is a very famous text about young adult dystopian fiction, and in their introduction, the authors stress that the desire to provide both education and escape is one of the distinctive features of young adult fiction. And they break down their analysis into three major areas of contention. How do these texts balance didacticism with pleasure, whether they expose radical political change or they mask an inner conservatism, and whether they offer their readers hope or despair. And I will particularly focus on this, the third part of this statement. So my presentation will propose an overview of a couple of young adults novels on climate change, and I will particularly consider whether they offer hope or despair, or whether they offer both hope and despair. And I will focus in particular on the emotional responses that are evoked when readers empathize with characters, and when they inhabit emotionally the story worlds that surround such characters. I will try to pay a particular attention to the entanglement between negative and positive emotions. So the negative emotions are climate anxiety, eco-grief, and so many more. And the positive emotions might be the hope that can emerge from grassroots activism, the spontaneous collectives and moments of solidarity that can arise in a moment of disaster, the altruistic emotions that can activate trajectories of change. And I will follow this beautiful book by Sarah Jacquette Ray, who says that pedagogy doesn't have to follow an arc of hope in order to prevent despair. So I will consider the genre of young adult dystopia as a privileged site of investigation to explore the importance of cultivating both positive and negative emotions, as young adult dystopia deals with dark times but maintains the potential to inspire the social dreaming that is central to utopia. So it can challenge and disturb at the same time young readers. So these are the novels that I'm gonna tackle. I will particularly focus on the first one, as I wrote in the abstract, but I will also make some references to the Carbon Diaries by Cecil Lloyd, as they deal with similar themes, and in particular, they propose a similar representation of transformative and collective hope. So let's start by Green Rising. It's a novel published in 2021 by British author Lauren James, who is also the editor of the anthology that you can see here, Future Hopes, Hopeful Stories in a Time of Climate Change, which might be interesting for everyone participating in this conference. So Green Rising is the story of a climate change activist named Gabrielle, who develops the supernatural ability to grow plants from her skin. And her story is entangled with that of other teenagers around the world who develop the same strange power, which is named the green finger power. Okay. In particular, her story is entangled with that of Hester, who is the daughter of the CEO of a huge oil company that is destroying the planet, and with the story of Theo, who is the son of a fisherman. So the three of them have nothing in common, but when they start developing this new strange power, they realize that they can use their ability to save the planet. And in order to really have an impact on the planet, they have to work together. Okay, so there is a collective dimension. And they have to work together, especially because they live in a world where there are plenty of energy corporations that want to use young people power, this new green finger power for their own profit. There is, for instance, a man named Edgar Warren, which is very similar to this guy. He's the founder of the Warren space. So he's planning the colonization of Mars. And he wants to use this new green finger power to grow plants on Mars instead of focusing on planet Earth. The young protagonists of the novel, on the contrary, understand that trees must grow on this planet in order to save it from climate change. As you can see here, trees. The more you get rid of trees, the more the planet suffers. So if we can grow even a few ones, it can make a difference in the world. The novel explores the negative and painful emotions related to climate change. There are several characters in the novel that describe how desperate the situation is. So there is a lot of desperation. I'm not trying to be a doomsayer, but you need to see how desperate the situation is. If you don't panic, there's nothing, then nothing is ever going to get done. Climate disasters are happening all over the world at this very second. But the three protagonists especially, they also learn throughout the novel how to come to terms with their emotions and especially with their anxiety related to climate change. As you can see here, for instance, how do you cope with being this afraid all the time, she asks. It feels like the world is ending. I've been scared since I was a kid. I didn't think I could do anything except watch the planet fall apart. But now we can actually make a difference. We have a bigger resource that those politicians have never had, along with teenagers like us across the whole planet. We need to stop fighting each other and do something useful. And there's another similar quote. This isn't the end of anything. You can't think about it like that. We're going to continue living here forever, however bad Earth gets. Calling this an apocalypse just leads to fear paralysis. It gives people yet another reason to avoid acting. But this is happening, it's real, and so on. So you can see there's a kind of balance between something very bad happening to the world, this fear of the apocalypse, but at the same time trying to come into terms with this apocalypse using their new power in a collective way. And as we can understand from some of these quotes, the utopian impulse of the novel lies in the power of collective action. The young protagonists understand that when they work together, their power is so much stronger, and that it's nice for them to be part of something greater than themselves. And they also realize that it's nice to be connected to not only to other people, but to non-human others, to the earth. Of course, the novel has a very important post-human implication that I'm not going to explore in this presentation, but it's there. What is also important is that Gabriel is the only one that was an activist before developing this power, while Esther and Theo, they have to learn how to become activists and how to engage in this collective action. So the novel represents their coming of age as eco-citizens and climate activists. And there are also several internal discussions about what can be considered the best form of activism. So for instance, this is Theo speaking at the end of the novel. He still wasn't sure if he agreed with the methods Gabriel had used. He liked to think that their positive action, like growing sea meadows and forests, would have been enough to change things without the sabotage. So he doesn't really agree with the sabotage methods used by Gabriel, for instance. But he was probably giving the politicians too much credit. However uncomfortable Theo personally felt about the morality of the climate rebellion's uprising, he couldn't deny that he had been successful. So there is an internal discussion about which form of activism is the best form of activism. And something similar happens in the Carbon Diaries. These are probably the most famous young adult novels about climate change. There are actually two novels. One is set. They were published in 2008, so they were set in the future in 2008 because the first one is set in 2015 and the second one in 2017. They tell the story of Laura Brown, who is a teenager, and the novels are set in a future Britain under carbon rationing. So the novel tells the story of this teenager and her family, friends, and neighbors as they try to adjust to this new life. Laura's coming of age as an eco-citizen begins with her engagement with climate demonstrations. So there's a similarity between Green Fingers and these two novels. She used to be the girl who hated demos. She said she hates all the people on them. She hates all the slogans. So she was not an activist before. But there are several moments in the novels in which she understands that she can no longer stand back and watch what's happening. What's important, however, is that it is the other people around her who give a passionate voice to the global environmental justice movement. So for most part of the novel, Laura's participation in the climate movement is marked by a certain amount of skepticism. And this is important, as Aleka von Mosner argues, by making her heroine a girl who for the longest time insists on staying out of politics, the author avoids having her narrator become too didactic and preachy. So overdetermined didacticism, I add, is kept away through a gradual and not devoid of contradiction coming of age as eco-citizens of the novel's protagonist, which is similar to the one we see with Green Rising. Eventually, Laura understands that her decision to reject a complete radicalization is a political decision too. And she gets to the point when she can no longer turn a blind eye to all the injustices brought about by climate change. And she decides to join the civil disobedience movement in the UK, which is supported by global strikes in the rest of the world. In the last pages of the sequel, she joins a new protest force that is massing in secret in Waterloo. And for the first time since the beginning of the carbon rationing, she feels hopeful and alive, as you can see here. It's like, I'm actually young again. This is perhaps the most utopian, the most openly utopian moment in a novel, which is otherwise characterized by a very dark tone. And the most important feature of this moment is, I believe, its collective dimension. This is not, however, a hopeful ending attached to an otherwise dystopian story. And this is very similar to Green Rising once again. There are, I don't know if some of you have ever worked with young adult fiction, but there are a lot of controversies about the necessity to provide hope in young adult fiction, with some scholars and writers believing that in order to be attractive and ethical, young adult literature must give comfort and reassure its readers by providing at least a glimmer of hope and a promise that a better world can still be possible. Other scholars and writers, on the contrary, believe that this problematic tension between young adult literature's intention to instruct young readers and its impulse to reassure young readers with a happy ending does a disservice to young readers and undermines the strength of these novels. According to Raffaella Baccolini, however, the genre of young adult dystopia embodies this controversy. And she said, young adult dystopia, by their dystopias, I'm about to finish, by their very nature, deal with dark times and much in line with critical dystopias tend to offer open and not altogether happy endings. Through the combination of images of bleak future with hope still possible, they interrogate the present, but thus maintaining the potential to inspire the social dreaming that is central to utopia. So there is a combination between bleak futures and a kind of hope that is maintained within these pages. And she also says we need literature that challenges and disturbs young readers. This kind of literature is becoming more and more important in these troubled times. The presence of utopian hope at the end of the novel, I want to suggest, does not provide a comforting happy ending, but helps readers to come to terms with an imperfect world. And this resonates with Marco Caracciolo's work on contemporary fiction and unstable futures, where he proposes a shift from a negative understanding of uncertainty, in which uncertainty is considered to fuel indifference and fatalism about the future, to a more complex form of understanding of our times that can foster critical thinking. And similarly, Rebecca Solnit has recently argued that what can motivate us to act is a sense of possibility within uncertainty. That the outcome is not yet fully determined and our action may still matter in shaping it. And even though this embrace of uncertainty seems to be tied to the more and more misused buzzword resilience, Caracciolo makes it clear that his notion of embracing uncertainty is a necessary collective gesture, whereas the discourse of resilience is grounded, of course, in a neoliberal mindset, and it seems to favor individual action. And it's not coincidence that the focus of the last pages of the Carbon Diaries is on the collective dimension of this climate action led by young people. As you can see here, revolution is the very concluding word of this book. The second quote comes from Green Rising. So it's a quote from Emmeline Pankhurst. I incite this meeting to rebellion. So these words are extremely important in both novels. By using the words revolution and rebellion, the authors refuse to reassure their readers with a neat and happy ending, and they seem to suggest that a disruptive collective action might be necessary to make the voices of young climate activists heard. And this is especially important in times where we are witnessing a growing effort to intimidate and criminalize youth-led global climate movements. So radicalization, in other words, is a direct consequence of climate inaction. Most importantly, radicalization might create new possibilities for utopian hope. And I will conclude with a quote. I know that Jenny this morning she quoted Greta Thunberg's very famous quote, "I don't want you to be hopeful, I want you to panic." But Greta Thunberg also said a few years ago, we can no longer let the people in power decide what hope is. Hope is not passive. Hope is not blah, blah, blah. Hope is telling the truth. Hope is taking action. And hope always comes from the people. And I guess this resonates with these two novels. Thank you.